Friday morning. I hope that you've had a great week. I know this week in Missouri we've had a little bit of rain, so it's been pretty nice. The weather's finally cooled off, and we're having a beautiful day. And today I'm with my son Dan. And Dan, tell me a little bit about where are we in Missouri?
We're in southwest Missouri, about a half hour north of Bolivar, standing in one of our fescue fields.
Awesome. So, guys, a lot of times when we think about agriculture, we hit our big crops, right? We do our corn, we do our soybeans, we do our winter wheat. We've been around, we've gotten in some canola fields, some sugarcane fields, even some cantaloupe fields this year. But when you think about Missouri, and even going east from here over in Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, there are millions of acres of tall fescue pasture. And that's where we are today. And I thought it'd be a fun conversation to really just kind of branch out and talk about a bigger picture of agriculture. So first of all, Dan, tell me a little bit about tall fescue. The good, the bad, right? As we think about what do we use it for and why does it work so well?
Tall fescue is a cool season grass that grows in the southeast United States. Um, it is very drought tolerant because of its infection with endophyte, which that is great because the grass never dies, but we end up with issues in our cattle such as rough hair coat, fescue foot, losing the switches on tails, and trouble with heat tolerance.
So it's kind of the good and the bad, right? As we look at it, you talk to some guys that have been around even longer than I have, and they talk about this country before tall fescue, and they would talk about running a cow to every 15, 20 acres and really unproductive ground that we had. So let's talk a little bit then about how do we measure production? Because with corn and soybeans and everything else, it's going to be those bushels per acre, right? Or maybe pounds per acre if we're talking some canola, things like that, or cuttings per acre, right? In hundredweights with our watermelons and our cantaloupes. Then how do you measure production of tall fescue?
So in our grazing pastures, we're measuring based on cow days an acre, which is just how many cows that we can get on an acre for an entire year.
Okay, so cow days per acre. So break that down a little bit, right? So we're standing in your heifer pasture right now, and we've got some cows and calves coming up. So how do you kind of figure cow days per acre? Because I can do bushels per acre all day long on our crops. How do you figure cow days per acre?
So we're going to take the number of cattle. For instance, in here we have about 50 head, and then they are on about 5 acres. And so we take the number of cattle on how many days they've been in here. So they've been in here for 4 days on this rotation. So we take 50 times 4, which is 200, and then divide that by the number of acres, which is 5. So we'd have 40 cow days an acre on this rotation.
Okay, so you brought up a couple things I want to talk about there. First of all, you talked about 5 acres, and then you talked about a rotation. So when we think traditionally, a lot of times, a lot of us think, oh, we kick cows out and we leave them there till we run out of grass, and then we move them to the next pasture and we do the same thing. So you're talking about 5 acres, and actually right here behind us, you can see a poly wire that's hooked up to an electric fencer. So Dan, why are you so focused on breaking down the acres and then rotating your cows through it?
So the smaller the pasture that we can get in our cattle, the better utilization of all the different forage species that grow in it that we can get. But it also allows us to give each paddock the longer rest period and allow for more root growth and more leaf tissue.
So you brought up root growth and leaf tissue. So we're standing on a second rotation pasture, right? And one thing that we really saw this morning as you were walking me through here, not a lot of stem, but a whole lot of leaf, right? And a lot of that was due to the grazing that you already did. But that's where your quality comes from. But you also talked about root growth. What are we focusing on with root growth? And a lot of times when we're thinking production, we only think above ground. Why are you concerned about the below ground?
The below ground is how we take in all of our nutrients, and it allows for better drought tolerance when they can reach water that's lower down in the soil profile.
That's perfect, right? Because in Missouri, we always joke we're 2 days away from a drought. And actually, if you look on the UNL drought monitor, we're in a D0, right? So just abnormally dry if we want to think about it that way. But your grass is still growing, things are nice and green, the soil's cool. But one thing that you were sharing with me the other day that really shocked me was if we graze our grass down to like 2 or 3 inches, those roots can quit growing for 45 days. And so I think, man, we do that June 1st, your roots never grow again until the middle of July. And so you miss out on all that nutrient uptake. So talk to me, what is your goal then? So I visit with a lot of farmers and their goal is 200 bushel corn, 70 bushel beans. What's your goal on cow days per acre and why?
We're looking to push over 120 cow days an acre because that would give us 3 acres per head per year. And that seems to be the number that we can hit in Missouri. That is very reasonable to hit, but very economically.
So 3 acres per cow on a year basis. So outside of a real heavy snow or some ice, right, your cows are grazing all the way through.
Yes.
And I guess economics, it kind of makes sense, right? We aren't buying expensive hay or expensive supplement. The numbers definitely work out a little bit better. So talk to me a little bit though, what else other than fescue? So we're standing in this field and we've seen some millet. I know you've got some big blue stem, you've got some Indian grass, but you also are running some annuals. So kind of talk me through what else is out here in this pasture and what are some things you're experimenting with?
So in this pasture, we have a decent amount of Timothy this year that came up. There's a lot of red and white clover in here, which we've seen across all of our pastures this year, lots and lots of clover. And then as far on the annual side, is we plant some cereal rye and crimson clover that we graze in the late fall and in the early spring, and then follow it with some sorghum Sudan that we graze throughout the summer.
Awesome. So the idea behind that, right, that cereal rye obviously has a long growth period, but also just kind of get it off the fescue a little bit, right, as we kind of look at those annuals. So just kind of as we wrap things up, let's bring it all the way back around. Let's talk a little bit about fertility, because fertility prices are high for us. They're high for our farmers, right? They're high on crop ground. So let's talk a little bit about, man, what are we doing for fertility and when are you looking to place it?
So we put on a little bit this spring. I think it was a 40, 25, 15 mix. And the nitrogen really helped our grass growth, but then the P&K really, we got a really, really good stand of clover where we put it on.
Definitely. Yep, so as we look at that, right, it's that idea of just enhancing the growth. Now, as we think about going into fall, we talk about stockpile with fertilizer, right? So what are we talking about when we say, hey, we're going to stockpile and maybe we're going to put on 100 pounds of urea? So what's the goal behind something like that?
So stockpiling is to just increase the length of our winter grazing period and hopefully graze all throughout the winter. But what we're doing is we're coming in and grazing the grass and then taking stuff off around the middle of August and hoping to keep it very vegetative and a lot of leaf growth through the end of the year, but then putting on maybe a little bit of nitrogen to increase the tonnage that we're getting.
Perfect, right? So you get quality and growth, and it's what we're needing all the way through. So Dan, when I visit with a lot of guys, I often ask them, hey, if you could tell me 1 or 2 things that you've learned. And I want to say that you're young, but I'm going to be honest with you, you already know a lot, and you've already been through a lot out here. So what are 1 or 2 tips or tricks that you would share that you have learned about grazing cattle on fescue that drives success?
Keep them moving pretty quick. You don't want to leave them in one area for too long. That's what happens is they'll overgraze the good plants that they want to eat and they'll leave the ones that they don't, and that's when we end up with weed problems or undesirable grasses. And then always make sure the electric fencer is on.
That's awesome. I love it.
Doesn't matter how broke they are to the fence. If it's not on, they will find it one time.
Spoken with true advice right there, right? Well, I hope you guys get an idea when we think about agriculture. Yeah, we spend a lot of time on our traditionals, but also there's so much more to agriculture as we look out and as we see what everybody's doing around us. So Dan, I won't hold you up. I know you got a busy day, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you.